Hello everybody, my name is JoyofCrimeArt, and within the world of animation you have a select few shows that live in infamy. Shows that are not only hated by the community at large for their supposed lack of quality, but also manage to become so controversial that the backlash surrounding them often becomes more remembered than the show itself. They say that first impressions are important, and if you mess it up it can be hard for a series to recover, and not many series exemplify this idea more than High Guardian Spice. High Guardian Spice is a fantasy adventure series that was created by Rain Rodriguez that was first announced all the way back in 2018. Set to be the first ever original series for the anime streaming service Crunchyroll. The series was set to follow the adventures of a group of young teenage girls, Rosemary, Sage, Parsley, and Thyme, who attend a specialized academy in order to learn how to become guardians. Whatever that means. When I first saw the promotional image, I'm gonna be honest, I was a little bit hyped. While American-made action cartoons are starting to go through a bit of a renaissance nowadays, they were a lot rarer in 2018. And I adored the cutesy magical girl-inspired art style. I love me a good girly cartoon when they're done right. However, I did have some reservations. Crunchyroll seemed like an odd choice, given how they were known for anime. The series was very much not that, and the premise also sounded a little bit derivative of other shows, namely Ruby. I mean, 4 teenage girls, all with themed names, going to a special academy designed to teach them how to become warriors, seemed a tad similar, but I was still cautiously optimistic. Then I decided to see what other people were saying about the show. Gosh, what happened? Did this series run over someone's dog or something? Well, as it turns out, the series had gotten into some hot water with its announcement, but why were people so mad? Those aren't spices, those are herbs! Well, as it turns out, Crunchyroll also released an announcement trailer for the series, and to say the trailer didn't win people over would be an understatement. The High Guardian Spice announcement trailer should act as a case study on how not to announce a series. They barely talk about the series, plot, or the characters at all. They don't show any footage outside a few storyboards and character models, and instead spend most of the video talking about how the series would be done in 2D, which I mean, yeah, most shows are, so I don't see why they saw that as such a flex, and talking about how diverse their characters and creative team are.
We are 50% female in all the creative roles, and our writer's room is 100% female.
50%, 10 female writers. Hey, wait a minute, that's not how math works! Also, the statement isn't even accurate since the creator of the show, who is also a writer, is a trans male. So in Crunchyroll's attempt to come off as progressive, they accidentally ended up misgendering a trans person. Oops! The trailer obviously led to some controversy, and I have no idea how the people at Crunchyroll didn't see this coming. Now, I want to make it clear there is absolutely no problem with having women on your writing staff, but when your crew is made up almost entirely by women, it kind of feels like you're going out of your way to exclude men in the name of quote-unquote gender equality, which seems kind of hypocritical. You should hire people based on who's the best for the job, not based on gender or any other arbitrary criteria. Now, it is possible that the best people for the job just all happen to be women, but given how proudly they proclaim it in the trailer, it definitely comes across like this was an intentional choice and not just a coincidence. But really, is it that big of a deal? I mean, at the end of the day, it's the end product that really matters. It's not like members of the crew were saying we should kill all men or anything. Look, okay, this tweet was written a long time ago, and she was Tumblr pilled back then. Alright, we've all been there, cut her some slack. But it wasn't just the all-female writing staff that had people in a tizzy, but more the general vibe the whole trailer had. They didn't show any footage, didn't talk about the show's plot or characters, and focused almost entirely on the diversity angle, which many found to be pandering. There isn't nothing inherently wrong with having a show featuring a diverse cast of characters or a diverse crew working behind it. It can be nice sometimes to see stories tackled from different perspectives. Variety is the spice of life after all. However, when your main selling point is the diversity, it's hard for it not to come across as desperate. It makes it look like you're not confident in your series being appealing in its own right, so you're using the diversity as a crutch or to shield yourself from criticism. There are tons of cartoons nowadays with diverse casts when it comes to sexuality, gender, race, and body types. So what makes your series so special? What's this show going to offer that those other shows aren't? As it turns out, the creator, Rain Rodriguez, was not happy about how the series was marketed. He actually wanted the marketing to focus more on the show's actual merits, and it was Crunchyroll that decided to market the series almost solely on the diversity angle. But at this point, it didn't matter. The damage was already done. At this point, there was no going back. I will say though, if Crunchyroll really wanted their site to lean hard into progressive identity politics, I'd much rather have them go down this road and just make their own thing, where they can really express those views, as opposed to editing the work of already existing Japanese anime and attempt to make it more quote-unquote progressive. The series had also gotten itself into a bit of controversy for some other reasons. For one, a lot of die-hard anime fans were upset that despite this being very clearly a Western cartoon, the series would be airing on Crunchyroll, a streaming service that specializes almost exclusively in anime. A lot of people were concerned that stuff like this would be the direction that Crunchyroll would be heading going forward, and were understandably concerned about the prospect of bean mouth spreading. I admit Crunchyroll does seem like an odd choice for the series at first glance, but the more I think about it, I can at the very least understand the logic. Since Crunchyroll relies almost entirely on licensed content from Japan, it means they have to share a cut of all the profits with those anime studios and distributors. So it makes sense to start focusing more on in-house originals, that way they could keep more of the profits. And with High Guardian Spice clearly borrowing from both anime and Western animation, perhaps Crunchyroll higher-ups wanted to use this as a bit of a test, to see if the series would be able to attract an audience of people who weren't typically into anime, while still appealing to the site's core audience. And look how well that turned out. Not helping was the fact that Crunchyroll would always market itself by saying things like, by supporting Crunchyroll, you're helping to support the anime industry, and stuff like that. Plus, from what I could gather, Crunchyroll's site just didn't work the best, especially back then, suffering from loading issues, general bugs, and a video player that was of way lower quality than was generally considered the standard for most streaming services at the time. So many people saw this move as Crunchyroll taking subscribers' money that they could be using to support the anime industry, or to fix their site, instead were using it to make a show that most of their subscriber base didn't even want in the first place. Though in actuality, it's not like Crunchyroll was taking their subscribers' money to fund the series directly. Crunchyroll gets loans from other companies for these kinds of projects. I can understand the thought process of anime fans wanting their anime streaming service to stay focused on anime exclusively, but to be fair, it's not like Crunchyroll hasn't aired American-made content before. Ruby, another anime-inspired series created in America, had been streaming on their site for years at this point, so I didn't really see it as that big of a deal. But regardless, it seemed like no one was excited for this show. Anime fans hated it, cartoon fans were uninterested in it, people on the right thought it was too woke, people on the left thought it was too pandering. But no matter what your opinion on the show was, it didn't change the fact that it was coming. The announcement video's title made it very clear. This show will be coming out in 2019, whether you want it or not. Then in fall of 2019, over a year after the series was announced, the creator said in a tweet that production had wrapped. Surely, the show will be coming out soon, right? 2019 came and went and nothing. But then, in February 2020, the series finally appeared in a sizzle reel on Crunchyroll's YouTube channel talking about several upcoming originals. Then back to radio silence. But then, in August 2021, we finally got a trailer. 3 years after the show was announced, we finally got some actual footage. That's progress. The trailer ended saying that the series would be coming soon. You sure about that? But then, on October 11th, 2021, it was finally confirmed that the series would be officially dropping in a little over 2 weeks on October 26, 2021. The show was in production hell longer than close enough. Heck, this show was initially announced as Crunchyroll's first ever original series, and by the time it actually came out, it was the 12th. My god. Now, what was the reason for the delays? Well, we don't really know for sure. It's possible the series was delayed due to internal struggles going on at Crunchyroll at the time, as the time between High Guardian and Spice starting development and its actual release was so long that the company actually ended up changing ownership several times, which can result in executives leaving and being replaced with new people who have new visions for the company, which can hinder production. Though I'm gonna be real here, I don't think that was the sole reason for the delays. I think after all the backlash the announcement trailer received, Crunchyroll just had no idea what to do with the series. Everybody hated it, and I think the higher-ups knew this, so they held off until eventually deciding to quietly drop the series with next to no promotion after everyone had forgotten about it in an attempt to salvage their image. I mean, why waste advertising money to promote a series that already had so much bad press? But at least the series was out, so now at least people could finally watch the show and judge it on its own merit. So what did people think of it? They hated it. What do you think was gonna happen? Bad writing, lousy world building, inconsistent tone, cheap animation, awful voice acting. The few people who still remember the show absolutely tore it to shreds, which caused me to wonder, Could the show really be that bad? I mean, with the show getting so much hate prior to release, it kind of feels like a lot of people might not have went to the show with the most unbiased of mindsets. And since I missed the show when I did my 2021 year in review, I figured now would be as good a time as any to give the series an honest look, and see if the series really deserves to be rated a 1.5 out of 10 on IMDb. I mean, even Velma has a 1.6. So let's put all the controversies behind us and dive right in, and talk about High Guardian Spice. So as I said at the beginning, High Guardian Spice follows the adventures of a group of young teenage girls, Rosemary, Sage, Parsley, and Thyme, who attend High Guardian Academy in order to learn to become Guardians. Now what is a Guardian, you may ask? Well, after watching all 12 episodes, I can confidently say that I'm still trying to figure that out. Basically, a Guardian is just your typical fantasy adventure like you'd see in a Dungeons & Dragons campaign or something. They go around and fight monsters and bad guys, sort of like hunters from Hunter x Hunter or huntsmen from Ruby. Though the show honestly does a pretty poor job explaining this, and in fact does a pretty poor job explaining how this world works in general. They just kind of throw you into it. I mean, the world of High Guardian Spice isn't anything super complicated or anything. It's pretty much just your typical fantasy settings, so it's nothing too hard to understand. Though a little bit more exposition probably would have been helpful. Still, it's a very adventure-friendly world, which is good if you're hoping to build a long-lasting franchise. Like, I can totally picture people making their own High Guardian Spice Zonas. Here, this one's mine. Their name is Cumin. Our main character is Rosemary, a ditzy, optimistic, tomboyish young warrior who dreams of becoming a famous guardian just like her mother, Lavender, who went on a mysterious mission years ago and hasn't been seen since. And I know I keep making the Ruby comparisons, but like, that's just Ruby Rose's backstory, like, verbatim. Still though, I like Rosemary. Her optimistic, fun-loving personality can be a bit infectious at times, and she has a good arc about learning to become more responsible and realizing that being a guardian is more than just fun and games. Nothing groundbreaking or anything we haven't seen in other fantasy stories like this before, but it works well enough for what it is. Then we have Sage, Rosemary's quiet and supportive best friend, who often tries to keep Rosemary in line. She's a mage who finds herself conflicted due to being raised in a household that uses exclusively old magic, while the cool kids at school are using new magic. Now what's the difference between old magic and new magic, you may ask? Well, after watching all 12 episodes, I can confidently say that I'm still trying to figure that out. Okay, so like from what I understand, old magic draws energy from the planet through the user, and requires something of equal value to be given up in order to cast a spell. Well, new magic channels that same energy through these objects called Terra Spheres, which allows the user to stockpile more magic without as much of a cost. So new magic is more powerful than old magic and can be done a lot easier, but is also more dangerous in the wrong hands as the magic is more concentrated. I think. But again, the show doesn't really explain it all that well either. Half the information I was only able to glean from the creator's Twitter, where all canon lies. Which causes Sage's arc to feel a little hollow as a result, since we as the audience don't really understand the conflict or why Sage feels so conflicted. Like from the outside, it just seems like new magic would be objectively better. Sure, it's more dangerous, but as long as you're responsible with it, it seems like the obvious better choice. Honestly, I think the concept of there being two types of magic is really interesting, and I like the way the arc ends up resolving with Sage realizing that she doesn't have to choose between one or the other, that she can use the two types of magic in tandem in a way that can complement each other. But I think if they really wanted this arc to work, they need to make the difference between old and new magic a lot clearer. Next we have Parsley, a dwarven blacksmith who's honestly probably my least favorite member of the cast. She's not a bad character per se, she's just kind of boring. There's not really much to her beyond her just being kind of generically nice, most of the time anyway. But of all the characters, she's the one I feel has the least of an overall arc. There's this one episode about her parents wanting her to drop out of school to help raise her siblings that I kinda like. Parentification isn't a topic I see tackled often, so it was kind of nice to see. That was only one episode, and even then it was only a subplot. And then there's Thyme, a stoic elf who acts as the serious one of the group, who was forced to flee her homeland after it was ravished by something known as the Rot, these weird purple vines that suck the life out of anything that it comes in contact with. All while her father was forced to stay behind to protect their home, with Thyme wishing she had stayed behind to help too, resulting in conflict with her mother who forced her to leave for her own protection. Like all the other characters, Thyme is fine, and she has a fairly basic but still competently done enough arc about learning how to open up to people. We also have other characters like Amaryllis and Snapdragon. These two bully characters start off in a supporting role, but as time goes on basically become main characters. First we have Amaryllis. You know this character? Yeah, Amaryllis is this character. She starts off the series with one of the most one-dimensional mean girl archetypes I've ever seen in Western animation. Though honestly, I'd be lying if her blatant one-dimensionalness early on in the series didn't have a bit of charm to it. Like at first I hated how one-dimensional one-dimensional she was, but as time went on I sort of grew to love her for that very reason. It became sort of funny how stereotypically awful she was for absolutely no reason. I can kind of admire how much they commit to the bit. I feel like she tends to get some of the best lines in the series.
Don't worry, I'm here. At ease, pores.
Also, more snobby Mean Girl characters should carry an axe, I'm just saying. I also really like her relationship with Snapdragon. I love how Amaryllis is stereotypically awful to everyone around her for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Except for this one random person that she's weirdly loyal to and protective of for some reason. It's honestly both really funny and kind of interesting from a character perspective. It gives Amaryllis some much needed depth. Speaking of which, let's talk about Snapdragon, the snarky kind of obnoxious kid who looks like Giovanni Batage from Empath Race. For all the people who headcanon Giovanni as trans were right. Oh, by the way, Snapdragon's trans. Going by male pronouns of the series proper, though seeming to be more comfortable acting feminine, with the creator confirming that Snapdragon is a trans girl and would have been seen fully transitioning had the series gone on longer. I honestly kind of like how this arc is handled, even if it is unfortunately cut off before it can reach its conclusion. While trans rep is becoming more common in Western animation, I feel like most of the time we see it with characters who already feel comfortable with their new identities. So it feels kind of fresh seeing a character go through that transition and learn to become more confident in themselves. And it helps us as the audience get a better idea of what's going on in the character's head. It makes it easier to understand for anyone who's not as familiar with how these kind of things work. Plus, I think a lot of trans people could probably relate to what Snapdragon is going through. They even play around with combining the LGBT themes in the fantasy world they created. Like, instead of having gender affirmation surgery, it's a potion that they have to take once a month. I thought that was kind of creative. I also like how Snapdragon being trans isn't all there is to her character. She has an arc about learning to become less of a jerk, her friendship with Amaryllis, and a romantic subplot with Sage. Honestly, she's probably one of the more fleshed out characters in the show, and there's more going on with her than just being trans. Overall, I like most of our main cast. They're not anything amazing or anything, like you've seen most of the tropes done before. These characters don't really do that much to go beyond their tropes, but I enjoyed them enough and wanted to see what was going to happen with them, and they have a fun dynamic with each other. We also have our villains, known as the Triumvirate. We don't really know much about the Triumvirate or what their goals are, but it seems like they are somehow connected to the overall imbalance of magic, and the rot that has infested Thyme's home, which has begun to spread to the school and surrounding lands. We don't really see much of the Triumvirate, as they stay mostly in the shadows, but we do see some of their minions, like Olive, this cat girl, because of course there would be a cat girl, who ends up feeling conflicted when her boss orders her to murder our heroines, as she sees herself more as a spy than an assassin. I like villains who follow a moral code of some kind, though I do admit her redemption arc was a bit obvious. We also have Mandrake, who is way too cool a villain to only be in one episode, and rivals Double Trouble from She-Ra in terms of best flamboyant shapeshifter. Let's talk about the show's writing. Episodes early on start out mostly episodic and lighthearted, focusing on more slice-of-life adventures around the school, with episodes becoming a bit darker and more serialized as the show goes on and the main plot begins to reveal itself. The show has some tone issues. When you boot up an episode of High Guardian Spice on Crunchyroll, you'll come across this warning, which is kind of surprising since the show looks so kiddie. And for the first several episodes it is. But as the series goes on, you start seeing characters swearing a little bit more and violence starts to increase. Now, a lot of series do stuff like this where they start off as kiddie and get darker as the series goes on. However, it feels kind of jarring here. Not just because none of the promotion prior to release gave any indication that this would be the tone the series would have, but also because even when the show starts to get darker, we still have silly comedic moments that just end up clashing. 1 minute we're having a fun mermaid adventure that looks like something out of a straight-to-DVD Barbie movie. A few minutes later, BAM! Old Yeller. And as it turns out, this was due to executive meddling, as the creator actually wanted the show to be aimed at older kids and teens, sort of in that Steven Universe demographic. With Crunchyroll pushed to make the show more mature, I guess to try to keep it more on brand with the type of shows Crunchyroll normally airs, but so jarring, and I'm guessing this change happened pretty late in production, because the first few episodes have almost no swearing or violence in them at all. Still, this warning at the start of each episode is really weird, since the warning is usually reserved for TV MA programming, and High Guardian Spice, even at its worst, is still like a TV 14 max. Maybe they put it here because the show looked so kiddie, and they didn't want younger viewers stumbling upon the series to think it was more kiddie than it really was. Though I don't know how many people under 14 are really watching Crunchyroll. Like, if you're old enough to watch My Hero Academia, and then you're old enough to watch High Guardian Spice. A lot of people point to the tone as an issue, and while it is jarring, I do admit it kind of keeps the audience on their toes. Like, as dark as some modern kids cartoons can be, you always know that nothing that bad is going to happen to our main cast. But here you're kind of unsure as what's going to happen. Can they get away with killing someone off? Maybe. It's all up in the air, which kind of helps raise the stakes a bit. Let's talk about the series animation. Aesthetically, it looks pretty good. Its art style is very appealing, though you can tell that the show was done on the cheap. Live action PNG bred jump scare. Turns out Crunchyroll didn't give the show very much of a budget. The show had about the same budget as your average 11-minute comedy, despite being a 22-minute action show with way more detailed characters and backgrounds. So the show can look a bit cheap. But I wouldn't say it looks bad, it just feels 15 years old. Like, look, see? Doesn't that look a lot more natural? However, there are times where you can see what the show could have been, and a few shots that you can tell the crew were clearly saving the budget for. Along with every other aspect of the series, the show's voice acting was also a point of contention, with the cast being made up of mostly people with very little voice acting experience. I know a lot of people point to this character a lot when talking about how bad the voice acting is.
I was just gonna practice a crying song I wrote. I'm doing, bard stuff.
But for context, this character is named Slime Boy, who was depicted in-universe as being a bit of an awkward weirdo, so I'm pretty sure this odd performance was intentional. Also, he's a precious cinnamon bun who I love. The voice acting could definitely be better, but I never really minded the voice cast all that much. You kinda get used to it the longer you listen to it. And given how shoestring the show's animation budget was, I wouldn't be surprised if the budget for audio was similarly low, resulting in the people behind the show maybe having to get some less experienced actors or not having the money to do more takes. But I think the cast do a fine enough job for the most part. I'm sure they would have improved if given more time to get used to their roles. But they were never given that opportunity, because after just one season, High Guardian Spice was quietly shelved. The series came out, no one really cared or noticed, and people went on to the next thing. Meanwhile, Crunchyroll kept making originals, though outside of Onyx Equinox, all their other series were made in more anime style, commissioned by outside studios, which honestly they probably should have done from the start. Production of these originals have seemed to slow down, probably due to Crunchyroll being bought out by Sony and merging with Funimation, basically giving Crunchyroll a monopoly on most of the anime industry, so that's fun. So in my research for this video, I learned that High Guardian Spice was originally pitched to Channel Frederator back in 2013, and I think that would have been a way better platform for the show to have aired on. I feel like the show would have fit right alongside shows like Bravest Warrior or Bee and Puppycat with its teenage demo and mix of Western and Japanese influence. Anything would have been better than Crunchyroll because my god, did they kneecap this series from the get-go! Crunchyroll's treatment of High Guardian Spice might be one of the worst examples of executive meddling I have ever seen. They were the ones who decided to market the show in a way that ended up alienating viewers. They were the ones who demanded the show be aimed at an older audience, resulting in the tone being so inconsistent. They were the ones who decided to give this show such a shoestring budget, resulting in the quality of the finished product to be diminished. And they were the ones who decided to keep the show on a shelf for 3 years, causing the few people who actually were excited for the show to lose interest. Honestly, I'm shocked the series is even still up on their site and wasn't written off for tax purposes at this point. High Guardian Spice was just not a good fit for the platform. Had the series aired on Netflix or something, I don't think it would have gotten nearly as much hate as it did. But the sad thing is, I honestly don't think it really mattered all that much. Like, let's say hypothetically Crunchyroll did everything right. They marketed the series in a less polarizing way, released the show when they said they would have, gave the show a proper budget with top-notch voice acting and animation, the whole shebang. Do I think the end product would have become a hit? Honestly, probably not. I'm sure it would have been better and would have captured a somewhat larger audience. But even when you remove all the production issues and all the controversy, all you're left with is a fairly typical magical high school series. And honestly, if you're looking for that, you have other options. And this series doesn't really do much to stand out from its contemporaries. The only thing that High Guardian Spice really has going for it that's unique is its LGBT rep, which a lot of its contemporaries also have, though I do give High Guardian Spice props for being able to be a bit more blatant about it. Overall, the series is just fine. I give it a 5 or 6 out of 10. It's nowhere near as bad as some people say it is, at least in my opinion. I mean, I had fun with it. The characters, while a tad generic, were all likable enough for the most part. The animation, while cheap, was aesthetically pleasing to the eyes. The story, while done before, did keep me somewhat engaged. The series even ends on a cliffhanger that could lead to some really interesting possibilities. Even if I kind of have my doubts that the series will actually commit though. There's some good stuff here. Nothing great or mind-blowing, but good. And a part of me is a bit disappointed that it has to end here. Perhaps had the show gotten a season 2, it could have really found its voice and improved, and become something really special. Believe it or not, the series does have its fans. Not many, but they're out there if you look hard enough. Still, I'm glad to give the series an honest look, so I could form an opinion on it and get to experience the parts of the series that I did enjoy. The next time you see a series that's a cool thing to hate online, maybe give it a shot yourself before judging it too harshly. It might be good, it might be bad, but at least you'll be able to judge for yourself. And who knows, maybe what you find just might surprise you. Have you seen High Guardian Spice before? And if so, what did you think of it? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I genuinely want to hear what you all think. And if you like this video, feel free to like it, subscribe, and consider checking out my Patreon if you want to see more videos like it. And as always, Have a great day.